Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all from wherever you hail from. We're delighted to see you back. We've got our merry band again with us, our various trainers, expert trainers at Maxon. And in addition, we're delighted to have special guest star, Seth Worley, famous for all those amazing Red Giant films through more than 10 years now that you've been doing them, Seth.
It's a long time, yeah.
Obviously doing them in your childhood.
Yeah. When I started, I was 12 at Red Giant. Somehow I've weirdly aged 20 years in 10 years. But, you know.
Watching the render bar and After Effects will do that to you.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we just a few things as regular attendees will know, we are recording this. And in fact, here's a list on the screen now of the sessions that we've got coming up. And we run the Ask the Trainer every second and every fourth Thursday of the month. And so please feel free also to send in questions. Training@maxon.net comes to us. And that's a useful way if you've got a creative conundrum that you'd like to solve, let us know and see if we can help with that. And also on Monday, we're continuing with the color team, our journey of shooting for the grade. So we've looked at for the first 2 weeks how to make camera choices that affect your grading decisions. And we're being joined by Sigma lenses on Monday, and they'll help us with the sorts of problems that you can fix with by putting a different lens on at a different time. Even things like metadata for lenses and how that can help you at the grading stage. So that'd be really interesting. And we record these sessions. Here's the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And here are the individual little videos. Here's a little tip for you. If you click on one of the recordings, not only do you get to see the recording, but inside the descriptions, especially on Ask the Trainer, we've started putting these little timestamps in so that if there's a specific thing that you want to have a look at, you can go straight to that. And also, if there are any project files that we cover during these sessions, then there's usually a download link in there. So that could be quite handy. And we're just keen to help you learning. And talking of learning, sorry, I've been practicing my segues. Then we've got Cineversity, of course, which is if you've got a Cinema 4D license or a Maxon 1 license, you have access to Cineversity. And that's a huge library of content. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is not only is it useful for learning stuff, but our resident expert, Thanasis Posantis, has asked if you would like to record some tutorials for Cineversity. So if you do, please DM him. I just got the link up in here. He's famously known as Noseman, of course, on the internet. So his Twitter handle is NosemanGR. And these are paid endeavors. So we're not asking you to do it for free. You can work out to be paid for doing these tutorials for us. So just DM Thanasis and he'd be delighted to talk to you about it. And thank you also to Anders and Kent for letting us say hi and letting us know that it's all working. You can see the screens and that sort of thing. Great. So one thing that we had a question in via email, training@maxon.net, which was about making trees inside Cinema 4D. So whilst we wait for your questions to pour in on this session, we thought we'd have a little discussion about the different options, because we had a quick discussion internally, and it turned out there's quite a few options and things that you can actually do with trees. So how does one make a tree? This is an open question to the group. How does one make a tree in Cinema?
So the first thing I would say is if you don't have to create a very specific tree, you don't create your own tree inside of Cinema 4D, but you download it from a source, or from the content browser. So Cinema 4D's content browser is also coming with a lot of trees and plants and so on. But you can also get them from TurboSquid and all of the other platforms that offer 3D models for download, of course.
Yeah, that's my go-to is content browser or Bridge. There's a third-party plugin, I can't remember the name, and it's for many, many years been the source in Cinema 4D for plants and trees. Can't remember what it's called.
Was it Xparticles?
Was it Lobework?
yes and yes.
They're just making up names at this point. Was it
Yeah,
Treebag?
yeah.
Was it Gandorf? Was it Bleegar?
There's one called Forester.
I'm thinking of Forester. That's the one I've been hearing the past couple of years more so than Xfrog and Loudwork. But all of those are great.
Hence suggesting Speed Tree, which has its name is on the tin, isn't it? How fast is Speed Tree?
Speedy.
Speedy.
As fast as a tree.
Yeah, because nature is so hard to recreate by hand. The chaos, just the form and the color and where everything goes. It's nearly impossible to do by hand. So it's best to find a solution that's tailored for that type of asset. Yeah.
I guess it depends a lot as well if you want like the animation of the tree growing or whether you just want like the model of a tree in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the style of the whole project might make a huge difference. So if you have a cartoony project or something that is like created out of paper or whatever, then of course you would create it yourself. But there are so many different ways that you can not just create a tree, but think of a tree in terms of style, that it's really difficult to answer the question in general, how you would create the tree. I guess the question itself was referring to real trees.
I think so. We've got trees in the content browser, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah, there's also a really cool example scene by Marian. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. It's it's from the architectural visualization. If Jonas wants to share, or I can share, we can show that and sort of deconstruct, just point out how the tree is
Yeah, sure.
made up of different. I'm sorry, Jonas?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay. Do you want to open that up, or?
I'll make you presenter.
Well, it sounded like you have something in mind.
Yeah, I think this is a really great example of some trees in Cinema 4D. So
Then,
yeah, if you want to make me presenter, I'll bring that up.
I'll make you presenter, Darren.
Okay.
As Ken has basically summarized already for us, it depends.
Yeah.
So there are a number of different ways that you can look at making trees, and depending on, say, what you need, steal them. I mean, utilize them from the content browser, purchase and download from various websites. If you're going to create trees from scratch, then the modeling techniques that we've kind of shown before are there. It is polygonal modeling, which of course can be slow and tedious and, to be honest, really tricky when it comes to creating the chaos and the organic side that Darren was talking about. There is, of course, sculpting in Cinema, which gives you a little bit more free reign. Procedurally generated trees based on espresso or hair and generating leaves. So there are a number of different ways that you could do it, but let's see what we've got here with what Jonas is looking at currently.
So yeah, this is, if you go to your content browser and then example scenes disciplines, and then architectural visualization, into scenes, you will find Lake House, and that is the file that I have open. I also have the render open over here. Although we don't have although I'm not going to be building a tree, we can at least see how, for this particular project, which is a still, how it's put together. So let's go solo here, and we have all these different parts of the tree, and we'll start with the trunk. I don't want to spend too much time on these. But it's very simple. Let's see, let's go MD. it's pretty simple geometry. There's just some chaos in its form. The material is, there's, what we're going to see a lot is photo-based textures. And let's see, then we have some branches, a couple of different models of branches, and there's so many different ways to generate this type of geometry. Whether you're, tracing some particles growing out, there was actually a really cool, and this was by Chris Schmidt, tutorial series on Cineversity, how to create, there's like a tree generator using thinking particles. And so that should still be on Cineversity. Leafs tend to be simple planes, simple polygons with an alpha mapped texture, because there's so many of them. And so there's a couple of different leaves, with different textures. There's some pine cones, and then there's some roots. And this is all for a still. So, there are seams between all of these models. If we were animating this, that would, there'd be a number of additional issues and challenges that we'd have to speak to. But for a still, you can see that that tree is just perfect. And ideally, you'll have closest to the camera, the most detailed tree. And then in the background, you're going to have much more simple trees. Now, if we look in the content browser, let's go to, let's see, plants. So we have European trees mature, young. There's some garden exotic, some grass elements, houseplants. But so these would be the models that would be closest to the camera. And then farther away, you could use some of these. Now, let me just go in a new project. I'm just going to drop in a landscape. I'm going to drag a couple of these in like so, and then cloner. So I'm just going to clone them onto the landscape randomly. So I'm going to make sure that the clones is set to random. We're going to go with object mode, landscape. I'm going to go with a surface distribution, and let's turn that up. Now, the issue that, one of the rendering issues we have is because these are simple planes, let's actually check those out real quick so you can see them. There we go. They're like essentially sprites. They're always going to be looking at the camera, which is exactly what we want. But when we get the cloner in there, it sort of resets that. So what we can, there's a number of options we can do, but I'm just going to, let's see, can we just turn, let's just add a MoGraph effector target. Let's say, look at camera, and then we'll add a random effector. Oh, I heard a ding.
Sorry,
and
that was me.
Oh, it's all good.
Since I've interrupted you, you might be going down this route anyway, but John's asking, what is the quickest way to deform the geometry? So for example, in this case, the tree trunk. So rather than moving various points by hand to get a wavy shape of the trunk, is there a fast way to get the similar results?
These are simple planes. So here, let's turn this off. This is there just isn't enough points in this geometry to deform. So we need to, slice it up, and then we could do something like, okay, so let's give that a go. Let's turn that off, and let's just get this one tree out. So this is not an ideal solution. It's probably not, what I would actually end up doing for something that was really close up. And you'll see why in a second, but let's see, let's go to edge cut. And let's add a couple of cuts here. So there's some additional geometry to deform. And then I'm going to go into this view here simply to draw a, let's do a Mo spline so I don't have to mess with drawing out a spline. Let's see, what do I want 90. Let's go object, rotate. Cool, we'll get that pointed up and we'll adjust its length to about the height of that tree. Now this we can add, because it's a mow spline, we can add the force, like wind. You know, any of these forces can work with the mow spline. So let's just give it some sort of rotation, move it over. Let's press play here. We can see that fan moving, so the wind is happening. I'll just add some turbulence and frequency here, and I'm not seeing it in the mow spline, so let's go like wind speed 50. What I tend to do is go include and drag in the wind, and that's in the mow spline forces tab. So now I can see 50 is a bit much, so I'm going to go back down to 5, and I can see now, you know, we really need to sort of dial in the settings. Let's turn that down. So that's just, you know, a little heavy-handed, right? But here we go. So I'm just, you know, we can use just a spline wrap with this. I've not used a spline wrap in conjunction with this look at camera tag, so let's see how that goes. But I'm just going to go ahead and select it, hold shift, and let's drop that in and set it to the y-axis and then assign the mow spline there. So now we could like add some fall off, you know, and further refine where this is occurring. So, you know, it's a start. But this, you know,
great to see your process on this, by the way, Darren, and just kind of announcing this and saying, "Hey, Darren, play with some trees," and then see how you're figuring it out. I think that's as valuable as where the resources are in the software. Actually, how you see might play with them. A quick question from Carlos: can these textures be converted to Redshift?
Yeah, that's really. So these are pretty straightforward materials. They're basically color and alpha. And because it's color and not a diffuse reflectance layer, the automatic Redshift converter really likes that. So I can just select these materials, and let's go ahead and switch to Redshift render. Select those materials, go to create menu or the Redshift menu, and then see tools, and I'm going to do convert and replace all materials. We'll give that a second to go. One thing you want to look out for whenever you're doing this is stacked materials. If you have more than one material on an object, that is not going to play as well. But here it's, you know, like I said, it's much more straightforward. Polygon selections are good with materials. That'll work if those are stacked, but yeah. So let's check this out. So we can see that the texture is going into an alpha splitter, which is taking the alpha channel out and putting it into the opacity of the material, the Redshift material. And it's basically just the color texture other than that alpha channel. The display in the viewport is not great, but yeah, so that's how you would convert that.
Since these are sprites, do you need to worry too much if you're cloning them about render times?
Yeah, there's plenty of issues with rendering this type of stuff, right? So let me minimize this.
On a second point, I've got an example when we're ready for John's question about deforming trunks and stuff. So
let me just say this: when it comes to rendering these, let me undo a number of times here. Let's actually select Cinema 4D and then undo a number of times. I've increased the amount of undos in my Cinema 4D. so I can just go crazy with this. Okay, so let's drag that back in. Let's turn this stuff back on. So we have all of these planes. Let's get a sky. Am I still in? Nope, I'm standard. Let's hit render. And the thing is, the renderer is only going to see through so many of these before it just stops rendering and it'll appear black. So to force that so you can see what that looks like, I'm going to turn down the ray depth to like 5. So this is in the render settings options. This is for the standard or physical renderer. I mean, you can see how the more of these you have overlapping, and it's the same issue if you have the high detailed tree with all the leaves, then you need to increase the ray depth to an appropriate value. Don't go too high because it's going to increase render time. Now, if you're in Redshift, there's a really great sprite node for exactly this, and it's great. And yeah, with that, I think I'm interested in what Matt found out. But
Okay, cool.
yeah, but that's my go-to for trees. I didn't really get into bridge or anything else. I know Jonas had some ideas, but yeah.
Shall I chuck it over to you, Matt?
Yep, I'll be super quick.
John's got a follow-up question, I think, that refines what he was actually asking.
Yeah, and that's what I've answered. So
I knew you'd be on top of it.
Yeah. So deforming, oh, I've got lots of windows in the way that you can't see. Deforming branches and like trunks and things like that. There's a couple of, well, I've used actually the same way, which is to use the Random Effector as a deformer. So super quickly, just to recreate this, you can create a cone, and I'm just going to create the height of that, make that a bit thinner at the top and a bit like that at the bottom. What you want is a lot more geometry in here to deform, so I'm going to make the height segments of that something like 16. I'm going to make that editable so that I know I've got the points I can deform, and then under my MoGraph objects, I'm going to create a random effector that I'm going to put inside the cone, and then under my deformer tab, I'm going to turn it on and turn it to point. Now it's going to go a tad crazy, and this is because the amount of the parameters that this has been allowed to develop and deform. So I'm just going to lower that to something like 3 centimeters in each direction, and I've got something that's quickly far more deformed without having to sit there and, like you say, randomly move each and every single one of those points to get something that looks a bit more organic. And equally, this works the same way with a spline. So just using a different view, I'm going to create 2 points and then select both, Command A, and create lots of subdivisions with that to give me way more. So let's go to 4. Let's subdivide again because I want more than that. Boom. And then this, I will do the same thing. So I'm just going to copy that random effector in here so that I've now got a deformed spline, which of course I can put into a sweep. Oops, wrong way around. Put that into the sweep, put the circle into there. That's definitely too big a circle. But then quite quickly, you've got something that's a bit more deformed without having to randomly move or manually move all of the points randomly.
And you can toss that random effector as a deformer onto that sweep too, right?
Oh, I need to group it.
You just have to place it like under the spline, then it should work.
Oh, okay. That does that too. So that deforms the outside of the points, and that would deform the general shape. So a couple of different ways, couple of different effects.
That's going to give you an accurate random deformer rather than a creative one that you would be dragging yourself, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
you can
do
do
my
this
throwing
with,
this back to now.
Sorry.
Sorry?
I was going to say, and this same idea, I love this technique, Matt, because you have the random effector. You could also use like the shader effector, right? You could get like a displacement map, from somewhere, and you can use that. Well, that's a whole other thing. Never mind.
Do you want to demonstrate that?
No, I don't.
You sure? I can throw
Yeah.
that at you.
No, I'm just throwing that out there. Sorry.
Okay, no worries.
But very cool.
Yeah, it requires the right textures, but I think it's going to work. Yes.
Cool.
Excellent
Right.
stuff.
Okay.
Did you want to add to this, Jonas?
Sorry, which one?
Add to the general topic when we were chatting before. You had a thing that you were thinking about.
Yes. What I wanted to say about the ray depth parameter that Darren just showed before Matt was taking over is that this is really a very. Oh, I actually don't need the screen for that. Thanks.
It's first rule of Training Club. If you're on here, you have to share your screen.
All right, I'm going to share it, but all right. Oh, that's my bad attempt of trying a MoGraph setup in a minute for creating a tree. However, what I actually wanted to say is that the ray depth parameter here in the options, that's something that is really important, as Darren already showed. When he rendered it, his forest in the first place, you didn't see any artifacts. There have not been a black spot or something. But when you work in production, sometimes you have to create a forest that goes over a hill, and suddenly you need a ray depth of 50 or more, and everything turns black if you don't bring this parameter up. So this is definitely the way to go in order to make the forest visible. I had it back then when I used to be a freelancer. I had exactly that scenario with where we needed a ray depth of, I think it was 100 or so, to make the forest show up without any artifacts. So yeah, that's actually a quite common thing. That's actually everything I wanted to add here. So
I love Carlos's comment about it's awesome how real life ideas come together. I love this, which is exactly, thank you for that, Carlos, because that's exactly why we're doing these sorts of things, because we've got lots of our content, in fact, where we think through things ahead of time and we consider how we might do it. But the beauty of doing this live and just like throwing an idea at everyone minutes before they have to do it is very reminiscent of what happens in real life. So and there's problems you have to solve and considerations you have to make, and do you have time to sculpt something, or should you go with the sprites, should you buy something and clone it and so on. So that's lovely. So that's really, it turned into a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, that's always the next point. So you actually don't want to use those sprites when you have a camera moving and the tree is very close to the camera. So then you would always use 3D geometry, so you have some parallax inside of the tree between all of the branches and so on. Once the trees are in the background, it doesn't matter too much. But if it's close, you definitely want to use 3D geometry, especially when the camera is moving.
Oh, can I add real quick? I know this is a third-party solution, but Bridge, a number of their 3D assets have levels of detail, and some of them include that simple plane with an alpha map texture. So when it gets that far enough away, it totally replaces it with that card. So it's cool.
Third-party stuff is good.
I think we can do that also.
Sorry, Ellie, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, if we're allowed to talk about plugins, Xparticles actually does like tree growth, because it's got like a brancher. So if you're looking for like an organic growth of a tree, yeah, I was having a little look at that.
That's a good point, and we are, of course, allowed to talk about plugins because that's kind of the real world. I know officially we are Maxon, but we live. If everyone sits in front of a 747 control desk of buttons when they have a blank piece of paper and a render to fill, so that lots of lots of workflows are available. And in fact, since you mentioned Xparticle, we had an interesting question earlier on about, this is from Jeff, talking about VDB clouds. I think he's picking up from Lionel's sessions last week, which you can see on the recordings, of course, on our YouTube channel, just in case you didn't miss it at the beginning. But Lionel was talking about doing VDB clouds and animating these using turbulence and using Xparticles for that. So his question this time was how to create an art direct, a VDB cloud with Xparticles for GPU rendering. And you had an interesting, I was chatting with Ellie about this earlier on. I think Ellie, you had a couple of thoughts on this. I mean, it's a whole topic in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, that's quite like a large subject to go through.
You want the screen?
No, I'm not going to go through it,
but that's the new rule.
I think
Whoever talks has to screen share.
It would take an hour on its own.
I can share something. I can share that link that you gave me, Ellie.
Yeah, so basically there's a guy called Wimbush who does a lot of tutorials on YouTube, and he's done like a 3-part series. And basically what the idea is, he uses Xparticles exposure FX to create like the simulation, which he then exports as a VDB sequence, and then he renders that in Redshift. That's a very short version of what he does over 3 episodes. But yeah, that's sort of the way. But regarding art directing, I don't, like as in to control the movement, I don't know how exactly you can control the simulation. But yeah, I don't know how much you could control like the physical movement. We're just gonna play
it's well, yes. Here's us asking questions and just featuring somebody else's video. We've added this link into the chat window, and Thanasis has just jumped in, thoroughly endorsing our chat of third-party plugins. That's my takeaway, Thanasis. Some things can be done in Cinema as well. The one thing we do want to do is, I had a couple of questions for Seth, and we were chatting earlier, and Seth said to me, or rather asked him, hey, wouldn't it be great if you showed that thing that we were talking about? So would you, if I chuck over the screen to you, Seth, would you mind sharing with us a few of your thoughts?
Sure.
Here we go. If I chuck over to you here.
Push the wrong button.
Because the other thing is that, I don't know if you know, but Seth has been making a lot of the Red Giant films for many years now, for more than 10 years, and they are just amazing, creative ways to tell a story. And they happen to use Red Giant plugins and tools along the way, but just as entertainment in their just pure form, I've been very much enjoyed them. So I'm sorry to embarrass you, Seth, but this will be the moment where I ask you to sign something.
If that's embarrassment, then I'll take it, man. You just keep heaping on all that praise. It powers me for one more hour. You guys were talking about trees so much. It reminded me, I wanted to see if I still had, what's funny is there is a little bit of self-consciousness coming into a Cinema 4D session with a bunch of Cinema 4D geniuses, and then being like, here's After Effects. So I thought I would at least contribute to the very fascinating tree conversation and show this forest of trees that I generated for a short film I made with my daughter last year, an animated short called Dino Feast. My daughter wrote and narrated this incredibly epic and ambitious and darkly funny story about dinosaurs and carnivores and herbivores going to war over what to eat for lunch. And there are a couple shots in it where the idea is it's a bunch of her illustrated characters on top of live action plates that I sourced from like Unsplash and various free stock imagery places. But there are some shots where the dinosaurs would actually be moving through like a 3D jungle. And so I found this. Let's see if I can pull up. I have a sprite that I made in here in Trapcode form. I have all my dinosaurs in here. They're animated looping sprites, and I have this palm tree that I actually went ahead and added some, I just burned in some shading on it and then generated a whole grid of them. And I believe the sprites are animated actually. Yeah, so the trees do kind of sway back and forth. Wait, no, they don't. That's my fractal field moving it. It's a still. Anyway, that's how I do trees, is the super janky 2.5D way.
Looks good though.
This is a really interesting point actually, because one of our, I think the fourth most popular question we ever have is why would I use particular versus say form, or versus doing particle effects in cinema or even Xparticles. And this is a wonderful answer to it as well, because of course, first answer, it depends. But it depends in this case how much time you've got, and if you can do this in After Effects with the rest of your workflow. I mean, how long did this take you to do?
This was like an afternoon building this forest. By afternoon, I mean like this is maybe 2-3 hours, including the prep work with the palm tree and stuff. My answer to that question is always, so the answer for me is like, when should I use Trapcode versus Xparticles or any other 3D based generator in some other 3D app? My answer is always, you should use Trapcode if you can get away with it. Like, just because you stay in the app, if you're already working in After Effects as your main host app, like, then if you can get away with 2.5D, or you can get away with doing it like this way, then do it this way if they're just background, or if the style of it allows for it. And then between particular or form, which one do I use which? I mean, the answer is obvious. If you want your particles to appear and disappear, you use particular. If you want them to sit and always be there, then form's the way to go. I used a ton of form on Dino Feast. I wasn't planning to talk about Dino Feast, but you guys got me all thinking about this tree forest again. There's like a whole shot in it. I'm not going to open up that project file because it'll destroy my computer and the internet itself. But if you go look it up, there's a massive like Avengers Endgame scale war scene with like these like hordes of dinosaurs running across a field at each other. And that, if you watch it, that entire scene, every element in it, with the exception of the background, everything moving in it was all in one instance of form. It was multiple, I guess we don't say emitters in form, it was multiple forms in the scene, scattered about with dinosaurs, and even like vapor and dust and such.
I've added the link. It's about 1 minute 50 seconds into the movie. I've added the YouTube link to this.
Well, because I could bring in my dinosaurs or my bunny rabbits. That's right, it's bunny rabbits at one point versus dinosaurs. So now we have a horde of bunnies. And what's fun is if I wanted these bunnies to be. By the way, if at any point you're like, shut up about Dino Feast, Worley, you won't offend me.
This is
Stop
fantastic.
showing
This
me
is a
bunnies.
bonus, actually.
Yeah.
This is our own private behind the scenes, how we made this thing.
Well, let's see, I think these actually are animated and looping. Yeah, so these hop. So I had these moving across frame, but I wanted them to be kicking up dust at the same time. But I wanted that dust to be occluded by, like, I wanted the bunnies and the dust to all occlude itself. So I believe I just duplicated that form instance. And I brought in this mist sprite, and excuse me. If I scale that up, you'll see they're now kicking up their own dust. I can probably colorize this.
Nice.
I love that.
Yeah, it's crazy. To me, the fun challenge is always, how can I do this in the most like duct taped backyard way possible? Like, I know I could easily open it, like, and that's kind of my relationship with Cinema 4D is like, I've learned how to use Cinema 4D. The beautiful thing is it's very, very intuitive and quick to pick up and learn. And I used it on the last short that I did before Dino Feast. I actually designed a whole monster that appears in the entire third act of the short in Cinema 4D, and I learned how to model it myself in a day. I learn how to use Cinema 4D, and then I like feel like an expert, and then I forget it over the course of like the next year. Like I use it on one project, and then I forget it, and then I get to relearn it all over again. But whenever I learn it, it only takes me a day. But so because of that, I'm always in After Effects, and so I love the challenge of always trying to figure out like how can I do this super complicated thing in a almost shockingly amateur or like stripped down way.
Well, it's interesting how the craft affects the form. I remember way back, I think it was After Effects 5.5, which introduced the fact you could have 3D space and you could have these flat plates. This was back either late 90s or early 2000s. And almost immediately afterwards, the Housewives, or American Housewives, I can't even remember the title of the show, but it had had exactly that animation. It had the fact that it was using the plates, and it was the first time anyone had seen it. And it went on to be hugely regarded and influential, and we started to see this kind of 3D plate animation stuff everywhere. But it was the very first time it had been introduced, and it was really just using the tools that you could and just making a feature of it. So I think it's absolutely relevant. Plus, what you were saying earlier on about being able to do this in an afternoon and have those iterations of design and tell that story, and that's as worthy as anything else.
Absolutely. Speaking of worthy, here's the dumb thing I actually was going to show
worthy,
you guys.
not Worley.
Oh, sorry. Everything sounds like Worley. No, you asked me like, so what are you working on? And like the first thing I thought of was this dumb. I don't even remember what I started trying to do here, but I stumbled upon this like new little fun process that I have now for that's not like a new process, but this fun workflow for I had this image that my friend Daniel Miggs, I honestly can't remember what I was trying to do originally, but I was using this this headshot of me that my friend Daniel Miggs took a while back to experiment with to try whatever I was trying. And it was one of those where like you quickly forget what you were trying to do because you start figuring out a new thing to try. And I ended up generating and making this strange, like this smoky look that looked to me like the cover of a Goosebumps book or something. Like it looked like really 80s or 90s, and like, you know, like everything was on the back of those like Olin Mills painted backdrops with like, and it all looked and felt painted, even though a lot of it was photography. So naturally I pulled up Albertus, the most 90s, 80s font that I could think of, and created what many have said looks like the cover of a Scientology pamphlet. I was going for like a mystery novel, but whatever. But as a result, now I've got this like fun new thing I can do. Hang on, where's this original footage? So like this was just a rock star on a green screen, and what's fun here is how much I love showing off how much. So super comp, you'll quickly learn, is like that's the thing that I am like using and showing off the most in like tutorials and things, because I'm still just so in love with this thing that we built. And I'll show you why. This is what it looks like without super comp. And I'll go ahead and turn the look off too.
Wow.
And this fun texture, but this is what it looks like. And that's what super comp does to it. Just to kind of break down some of what is going on here, I'll go ahead and turn off all the effects. I'll just do that. So I've got my smoke background, which the smoke, by the way, is this, I guess I'm just breaking apart rather than a comp rather than putting it together, but let's see, I believe the smoke is this, and it's just this smoke asset I got off of Footage Crate. And I applied Universe Gradient Ramp, which comes with these really fun gradients that I believe Harry Frank built in here. And I really love this duotone one that I drop on and I can affect the color and move it around. It's a standard gradient, but I just like the presets that Harry built for it, and I like the extra controls that I get in here. And I have a hue saturation on top of it, and I'm using transform in here to do like a scale animation that you can see when I turn this stuff back on. It's doing like a small camera move. I don't want to go to quarter resolution because it looks gross, but all right, just trust me that it's all moving. This is not SuperComp slowing it down. This is my dumb computer. I have a very old computer. So I have the smoke and I have optical glow on it, which I always in SuperComp will apply. In this case, it's a lot of glow added onto it, but I'll always add, no matter what, I'll try and add on the background, the very bottom, like background of my shot in SuperComp, I'll apply optical glow and do like a very minimal amount of glow and maybe a larger size, just because of the way SuperComp works. For those who aren't familiar, it communicates upward with layers, something that After Effects does not do. So if you apply a glow to a lower layer, that glow automatically wraps around all layers in front of it. And so let me see if I can show you a really good example of it. You see that light wrap is automatically happening just because a glow is happening to the layer behind that foreground layer. And so right there, like right off the bat, it allows me to, it just automatically generates light wrap for me. In this case, I wanted like a big fat glow happening from the background.
That's a good point, actually, because if you are shooting stuff on a green screen and you are just creating your own background, then you don't have a natural light wrap to fake the background. You're having to bring it up yourself.
Exactly, and I like when something can, because I'm adding this little bit of glow to the background, it's automatically wrapping the light. There's something mental about it automatically doing it that makes me less scared of it, because the second I apply light wrap to a foreground layer, I'm convinced I'm in the process of ruining the shot. Because like light wrap is just like arguably one of the most overused tools in the compositors toolbox.
This is true.
Looked great in the fourth Indiana Jones, though.
Hashi, welcome, Hashi, and you knew my exact. I'm guessing that you knew my exact thing I was thinking of. Like, have we talked about? Nope. Let's just not break that open. We've either talked about it or we're both just romantically meant to be together.
Though I do love that Shia blames himself for that scene not working.
Yeah, he blames himself, even though he's clearly wrapped. And I'm going to be quiet now because we know some of the compositors that worked on that. So I'm just going to be completely quiet now about that.
By the way, that's Hashi doing a stealth visit. Hi there, Hashi.
Yeah,
I slide in and I slide out.
I guess once you are a guest on here, you now have powers to chime in on future webinars, which means I'm excited for future webinars.
You can return the favor. I once heard a VFX supervisor saying that the key thing that they looked for in compositors was just a simple thing: when to dial down the light wrap, when to know you've done.
It's so true. Christine Golby used to tell me, like, if you get it to the point where you think it looks good and then you dial it back 5 more notches on anything. That's like her rule on anything in compositing or life, probably. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Like on top of this, I have this haze and stuff. And on my foreground layer, just to wrap up what I'm doing here, I've got 2 instances of the foreground. I've got a darker version that's been like leveled down to be super dark. And then I have this version that is using a set matte filter. And it's referencing this, what I've called sweep map, that's using CC Light Sweep, a tool Hashi convinced me to use and I never thought was something I would need, and is fantastic.
I think he says it in every single tutorial. That's another one on our bingo card for Hashi tutorial.
It's true. Light sweep. I never used it before, and then it's all over everything I do now. But in this case, I use it, and I have it sending out a cutout, so I'm using it as an alpha channel, so that I have these two layers on top of each other, creating this really nice light sweep, so that it's not, you know, overexposed light sweep. It's exactly where the original plate was at. So then with Super Comp, I blend it all together. The foreground layers have an instance of haze, which helps just kind of color blend it a bit, and then some volume fog that's helping wrap that light in a more organic, light blasty, volumetric-y way. And yeah, then some looks, which I think here is just a LUT and a little bit of texture. You can see there's all kinds of applications for this. Here's one. I was messing with this farmer dude and made the smoke all green and decided it was obviously an ad for an inevitable new show. Alien
I'm
Farmers
going to sign up for that show. That is definitely worth the subscription.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, that's this fun little smoky thing that I've been doing lately and looking for a good application for it right now.
That's really interesting, because we've been looking, I think, in some of the tutorials, and I think that privately we've been having conversations about doing Redshift fog and how to manipulate that and so on. So it's interesting. How long have you got to do something, and how convincing can you get away with without necessarily having to reveal a 3D scene as well?
Yeah.
That's a really nice technique.
I think we got a question for Seth in particular. Did you see that one, Simon?
Oh no, feel free, jump in, Darren. I was too busy watching what Seth was doing.
So Brett asked, not sure if you wanted to cover this or not, but he's been trying to master 3D camera movement using particular to go around an object, and he's wondering if there's an easy way to understand that, such as a light particle swirling around a subject.
So I'm not sure I totally understand the question. Master 3D camera movement using particular to go around an object.
How would you animate a camera going around particles swirling around something?
Yeah, well, if they're, let's see. My tricks for cameras, for camera movement tends to be like here. Let's just quickly set up a low key setup here. Oh, come on.
Doing a camera with a null seems solves a lot of problems as well.
Well, that's like my first go-to would be to so if I've got this emitter here and I want to orbit around it and keep that particle in the very center, keep that particular instance in the very center of frame, and I really just want to orbit it, then yeah, 100%, I'd create a null object. And it naturally is at the very center, and I would parent the camera to the null and then just rotate that null. And so I don't know if we'll notice the movement with this.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I do that a lot when I'm doing, like I'm wanting to do some depth of field effects. Like I want to move around like a particular instance, and I want it to be like at a really shallow depth of field and a really long lens.
That's also a very good workflow inside of Cinema 4D, just to throw the camera into a null and then just rotate the null.
Oh, smart. Yeah.
It's very cool, like for any 3D use case.
My other favorite thing to do is create a focus null. because you can, a lot of people don't know this, you can make sure it's 3D. You can select your camera in this null and you can say link focus distance to layer. And so now it will automatically, that focus distance is set to wherever that null is. And so say you have a composition with a bunch of different layers and elements you want to rack focus to, you know, like you can just literally copy and paste the positioning of each of those layers and paste them to specific keyframes on this focus null. And you can fly this focus null around a comp and your focus will adjust to it. You can also link, if we, let's just unlink this from the null that was controlling it. I believe, let me see if.
Such a great tip. Denver's just saying, mind blown in the comments.
Oh, well, another great thing is like you can, with, so like point of interest, I can set my point of interest to always be wherever this null is. Actually, I'm probably gonna have to link it to the position. Yeah, that's right. So let's try this again. Now it's always going to pan wherever I put this null that I'll call my look null. So its focus will always be with, it's a focal, you know, blur, and focus will be to wherever this null is, and it will always point toward to look at wherever this null is. So that, like, it's, you know, not always the best practice to just fill your comp with nulls, but you know, they're much less scary controls to me to have in a comp than, you know, than having to reference specific controls or parameters within each individual layers. And it's a quick go-to to be able to control and add, you know, you can parent these nulls to stuff. You can add all kinds of like expressions to them and have fun. Hopefully I answered that question.
That's
$1 million tip right there, baby.
I was going to say, I get the sense that Hashi was wanting to add a comment to it. That is pretty sweet. That's worth the price of admission by itself.
Good. Finally, I'm getting people their money's worth. Finally, it's been 10 years.
Yes, 10 years of putting out these free films. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's that linked focus null guy.
Oh man, I really should open up my Dino Feast composition. If you go watch the making of Dino Feast, you'll see how much I rely on expressions. I built these elaborate character rigs all in After Effects with expression controls on nulls that were set to, like, there was a run slider or an angle control that I could just rotate and it would automatically animate the character's legs with the puppet controls. That the puppets are all parented to nulls, and building it was the most fun part of that entire project. It's just the weird engineering and problem solving side of things that I've found is most fun in After Effects for me lately, even more than the creative side.
In fact, I've isolated that frame you were talking about. Can I grab the screen from you?
Oh, take it.
Because here we go. Here's in
Yeah,
the shot. Here's the bunnies you were talking about earlier on. And this, by the way, this is the link that we put in the chat and on one of the answers to the questions in the question area, and we'll put that on link inside the descriptions, of course, for this recording. But here are the bunnies, the form bunnies bouncing. And in fact, just very quickly, I wanted to say earlier on, but you were using the fractal animation capabilities of form in there, so that they are doing a perfect loop, which is the whole point. That the other answer to the question of the third most popular question we get: what's the difference between particular and form? And the apart from the immortal particles, as they say in the marketing, in form, which is the best description, the fact that you can then animate loops in form versus particular. But here's that scene that you were talking about, where you're getting all these animals doing that's almost like it is Braveheart influenced, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. It's every war film. And it's like, I mean, I'm telling you, first off, the second my daughter was like, started telling the story, first time I ever hear these stories, I've made several of these shorts with my kids. And the first time I ever hear the stories is when I turn the microphone on and record them. and it's while recording them that I either start getting a headache because I see all the work laid out before me. And that shot was the one that was like, okay, I can't keep up with my kids' imaginations. But that one shot back there with the bunnies and the raptors and the birds all, converging in the field, that's one instance of form. And that was like a really cool, fun achievement there, was because I wanted all these particles to occlude each other. I wanted the smoke to occlude each other. It's one instance of form. Now I did cheat a little bit. I ended up duplicating. Huh?
We never cheat. That's
never.
That's not part.
Here's
of
how I
the thing.
cheated. I wanted to get that. I wanted to be able to pull. I wanted to get that fog and that dust kicking up to be able to blur anything behind it. So I did duplicate the layer. I turned off the dust in the main layer, so we just saw all the animals. And then on the dust on the duplicate, I set all of the all the animals to black fill, so they were the same, kept their same shape, but they were entirely filled with black. And then the dust was the only thing that I didn't do that to. So I could then use that as I could put it to screen blend mode, and then I had a natural dust layer that would be occluded where it needed to be occluded and not occluded where it didn't need to be occluded. And then I, using super comp, referenced that and put all the blur behind it and everything. Other than that, though, it still is one instance of form all talking to each other.
What you describe as cheating is also known as compositing.
Oh, right. I forgot. Yeah, none of this is real. I always forget that.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's wonderful. That's really interesting. And I'd never considered that just to be one instance of form in a scene, but that makes so much sense, especially with the camera move and everything.
Yeah, it was fun. And it's something you couldn't really do 10 years ago. You used to have to duplicate form 1,000 times.
Yes, absolutely. Now that you can have multiple instances of form within the same one instance of it on one layer, that makes it much more adaptable. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just taking one look at the clock, and again, time has flown by. So that has been amazing to jump through this. What started off as just a simple, hey, how do you do trees in cinema, has actually covered all sorts of different techniques, splines and sprites and Redshift, and doing stuff in After Effects as well. And that's really the point of these sessions, that we were just doing this at random, depending what topic comes up, and just trying to think through something out loud, if you like, to simulate what it's like for you to actually do that in a project. So we have no agenda on this. We are representing all the tools across the whole Maxon range. So all the 100+ Red Giant tools plus Redshift and Cinema. So if you have questions that you'd like to jump in and get us early on the next session, please let us know. training@maxon.net, and then we will feature that first, if you like. But that's the fun of this particular area. It was the fun for me watching a team of experts think through something. In fact, I'm just doing this for me. You all know, really. We happen to be sharing it, but I would spend all my time watching these things anyway. Cool. And Brett was just jumping in saying this is a great short and the compositing is awesome. So I totally agree with that. And it's a lovely take on the deliberate fake but real look, if you know what I mean. Like, how can you have fake dust on a fake thing? It's real dust on a fake thing.
Thanks, man. I'm glad you guys all like it. Thanks for having me on today. This is really, really fun.
We really appreciate it, and thanks for sharing this. It's very generous of you to just to share those things, and also to jump in with the tree stuff, because we hadn't talked about that. So that fitted in with the theme. We should really plan these things.
I always keep trees on standby, so it really just worked out for me.
Always have trees on standby. There you go. Yeah. That is the title of this episode. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thanks, everyone, also on the team, for sharing all those nice tips earlier on. And you can find out more tips if you would like to attend to our future sessions. That was a good segue, wasn't it? So have a look at the Maxon new events page. This is where we got the stuff coming up. And I know I mentioned this before, but you can see all the recordings on YouTube, including this one in about an hour, hour and a half's time, on the Maxon Training Team channel on YouTube, where we have descriptions as well and links. And we'll add those links that we mentioned. We'll add the link to Dino Feast and the making of, and we'll add Jonathan Winbush link to the VDB stuff that Ellie was talking about as well. Great stuff. So thank you. Thanks for the kind comments on the questions as well. We really appreciate it. And thanks also, John says they're going to pass them on to other friends, other C4D friends for those particular events. So yes, thank you for that. And let us know, training@maxon.net. We're delighted to hear from you, and not only for questions, but ideas for future tutorials as well. And there we go. We didn't overrun either this time, did we?
What? Really?
Maybe.
Yeah,
We never overrun. We never overrun and we never cheat. There we go.
Everything's real.
Everything's real.
Hey, another Thursday, you guys.
I know, it's great. Cool. Okay, well, we'll wrap this up. Thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you hopefully on the next one of these.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye,
take it
everyone.
easy.